Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics. Dio here. Today we have a Dodge Sprinter with a 3.0 liter. The complaint on this Sprinter is the ABS light remains on and the ESP light remains on when the vehicle is driven down the road. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to confirm the complaint. After we confirm the complaint, we're going to connect a scan tool to the vehicle to see what kind of trouble codes we have in the ABS control unit that are causing this ABS light to remain on the dash. So now let's go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. So now I'm gonna start the engine so we can confirm the customer's complaint. So right there, as you can hear, the engine is running and the ABS light remained on with the engine running. Let me zoom you into the dash so you can see. So right there, the ABS light remained on and there's a message here on this dash display that says visit workshop. Okay, ABS light is on, and there's another light over here that says ESP. So ESP stands for electronic stability program. Okay, and that's part of the ABS system as well. Customer's complaint confirmed. As you guys see, the ABS light is on the dash. So we gotta figure out why the ABS light is remaining on while the engine is running. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna get the scan tool connected to the vehicle. So I'm gonna turn the key on. After I get the scan tool connected, I'll bring you guys back up so we can scan the ABS system. Alright, so I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. So let's see what we got. So we're gonna go to scanner. As you can see, we have two trouble codes in the engine computer. The first trouble code is 0500 Vehicle Speed Sensor Electronic Stability Program, ESP, can signal implausible. And then the other one is 2355 Exhaust Gas Recirculation Control, Air Mass Too Large. Okay, so these are the two codes in the engine computer. We're gonna keep those in mind. We will print out this list of trouble codes. We're gonna let the customer know, but for now we're just gonna focus on the ABS system. Okay, that's what the customer wants us to take care of, but we're gonna let the customer know about these other trouble codes that we have in the other modules. So on the transmission control unit, we have one trouble code, U240C, and it says implausible right rear wheel speed signal received. So it looks like there is something wrong with the right rear wheel speed sensor. Okay, so the ABS control unit is the electronic stability program. As you can see, we have three trouble codes in this control unit. The first one is 44F0 rear right wheel speed sensor circuit high, and then the second one is 7266 ABS/electronic stability program, ESP, not available. And then the third one is 7270 implausible front wheel speed message received. So it looks like there's something wrong with the right rear wheel speed sensor. Right now what we're gonna do is let's go straight to the ABS control unit. So we're gonna click on electronic stability program. Now what I wanna do is it looks like, let's read the codes again. It looks like we have a sensor that's not working. Okay, we may have a defective sensor or a problem in the wiring between the sensor and the ABS control unit. So it looks like these sensors are either not working or sending an erratic signal to the ABS control unit. So now my next step is gonna be looking at live data. Okay, I'm gonna graph all the sensors. I know this vehicle has 4 wheel speed sensors. We're gonna graph all the sensors and we're gonna drive the vehicle to see if these sensors are actually reporting the wheel speed to the ABS control unit. Okay, and whichever sensor that doesn't have any activity as we drive the vehicle down the road, that will tell us that the problem is on that sensor. So that will be the defective sensor. Okay, so let's back out of here. Let's go to data. So as you can see, we have a list of data here. So we're going to customize this list. We have a bunch of data, so we're going to deselect all. I'm just going to look at the wheel speed sensor data PIDs. So we're going to grab this one, okay, and this one, and that one, and this one. So just these four. So let's list them. Actually, I'm gonna graph all of them. Okay, this one is the right rear, the one that has a trouble code stored. Okay, so this is the problematic one. And then this one is the right front, and this over here is the left front. Okay, and this one over here should be the left rear. Okay, so as you can see, they're all reading 0, 0. So now as I start to drive, we should see this graph increase, okay, because these readings over here should increase as the vehicle is being driven down the road. As the wheel spins, the miles per hour reading over here, the value over here should increase. If the line on these sensors stay constant at 0, that will indicate a problem. Okay, so now I'm going to start the engine. So the engine is running. Now we have the brake light on and the ABS light. Now this brake light is on because we have a scan tool connected to the vehicle and we are inside the ABS control unit, so we're not going to worry about that. So right now on the scan tool we have 0, 0. So I'm going to start driving. So let's drive. So as I'm pulling out of the driveway here, as I'm pulling out, I'm looking at the scan tool at the same time. I can already see the difference over here. Actually, let me slow down so I can show you the scan tool. So we have activity on 3 graphs, but we don't have any activity on the right rear wheel speed graph. So over here, let me bring up the scan tool so you can see it. So right there, guys. So as you can see, we have some activity over here. Okay, so this is when we started driving. Okay, so the wheel started spinning at this point. As the wheel spins, this sensor over here, it's a 2-wire sensor, so it makes a voltage. Okay, so it's an inductive type sensor. So when the bearing starts to spin, there's a reluctor wheel, okay, or a magnet in the bearing, okay, that causes the sensor to produce a signal when the wheel is spinning down the road. So which happened over here. Just watch this. So I'm driving right now. So I'm driving down the road and look at what's happening. We have a flat line on this right rear wheel speed sensor. Okay. So this is the problem, guys. This is our problem. So right rear, 0, flat line. But on this one we have activity over here. So this is when the wheel sped up, and over here we were slowing down. So this is when I was pressing on the brakes, so I was slowing down here. Here we sped up a little bit, we slowed down, we sped up. So, and as you can see, all these graphs basically mirror each other. Okay, they look pretty similar. So what we have to do right now is we have to drive back to the shop and put this van on the lift and check the sensor. the problem could be the sensor itself or the wiring between the sensor and the ABS control unit. And I hope this is just going to be the sensor. If it only needs a sensor, it's going to be a quick and easy one. Or the problem can be the bearing, okay, the bearing in the hub, or the tone wheel that actually causes the sensor to make the voltage when the wheel rotates. Because sometimes I see the magnet on the bearing fall, okay, sometimes they fall, and you will end up having a sensor that doesn't produce a signal, while the problem is just the magnet. So we're gonna remove the sensor, we're gonna check the magnet on the bearing. We have to make sure the magnet is there, or if it has a reluctor wheel, we're gonna spin the bearing when we remove the sensor to see if our reluctor wheel is there. If the reluctor wheel is there, we're gonna replace the sensor, and that will be good to go. Or the other thing we could do, actually, before we replace the sensor, we can actually bypass the sensor on the right rear sensor, with the sensor on the left. Okay, we can jump the wires of this sensor, okay, the wiring on harness side of the sensor, with the sensor over here, and then we're going to spin the wheel to see if there will be activity on this graph. If there's activity on this graph, that will tell us that the wiring is good and the problem will just be the sensor. So now I'm going to get the scan tool out of the way. I'm going to drive back to the shop. Once I get to the shop, I'll bring you guys back up so we can do our test. So see you guys at the shop. I got the van in the air, so now let's test the right rear wheel speed sensor. So as you can see, we have two wires going to the right rear wheel speed sensor. The one up here is the wheel speed sensor, and then the other wire is for the brake wear sensor. Okay, so we're gonna follow the wire of this sensor. So if we follow it, we can see that the wire goes along this park brake cable and it goes up there. So we're gonna follow it so we can get to the connector of the sensor. So right over here, as you can see, we have 4 electrical connectors. Some of them are blue and the other ones are gray. All right, so the blue ones are the ones for the brake wear sensor, okay, for the pads, and then the gray ones are the wheel speed sensors. So I believe the one on the passenger side, the right side, is this one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disconnect this one. We're gonna disconnect this. Actually, before I disconnect it, I'm gonna show you the scan tool first. So now if I spin the wheels, we should see an activity over here. So I'm gonna spin the left rear, which is gonna be this one over here. So let's spin this wheel. So I'm spinning the left rear. So let's look at the scan tool. As you can see, we have some activity here, so that's good. So since this sensor is working, we're gonna bypass the sensor on the right side with the sensor on the left side. Okay, so let's disconnect the connector here. These sensors should be the same. I believe the connectors are the same. So I'm going to, no, I think I'm wrong. The connectors are not the same because this one is black and this is gray. So these connectors might be different. So the sensor with the gray connector is the sensor on the right rear, and the sensor with the black connector is the sensor on the left rear. So I'm gonna disconnect the one on the left, on the right rear first. Okay, so now I'm going to disconnect this one. All right, so this over here is the working sensor and this one here is the bad sensor. So what we need to do at this point is, let's pry this sensor out. We're gonna use these test leads to connect the sensor to the electrical connector of the sensor on the left, because if I was to try to connect this, it won't go in. As you can see, it's not going all the way, okay? the connectors are different. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert this test lead over here. So we want to make sure that we're making contact with the pin on the sensor. So right there we are connected. So now I'm going to use a long jumper wire. So I'm going to use this wire to connect the test lead, okay, to one pin of the sensor to the other pin of the wiring on the sensor, on the harness side. Now I gotta make sure that we're making good connection here. Okay, so right there. So now the other end of this jumper wire is gonna go to a back probing tool. So I'm gonna connect this to this back probing tool, and then I'm gonna back probe the harness side of the right rear wheel speed sensor. Okay, I know some of these sensors are polarity sensitive, so I'm just gonna connect to one side first, and then we're gonna spin the wheel to see if we will have some activity on the scan tool. But then if we don't, we can move these test leads around. Okay, so right there, now we're bypassing this sensor, okay, the sensor on the left with the sensor on the right. So now let's spin the wheel and see what happens. I'm gonna bring you down here so I can show you the data PIDs on the scan tool. So I'm gonna spin the left rear wheel to see if our data PID over here will update. Remember before, this one wasn't updating. So after bypassing this sensor over here with this one, if the wiring between the sensor and the control unit is good, we should have some activity over here. So now I'm gonna spin the wheel. So right there, what do you see, guys? So I'm spinning the left rear wheel. Now this one is updating, okay? So that tells me that this sensor over here is most likely defective and the wiring is good. From the computer to the sensor, now what we need to do is we're gonna remove the sensor and look at the tone wheel to see if the tone wheel is good. If the tone wheel looks good, then the problem will just be the sensor. Because when I lifted the vehicle, I checked the bearing on the right rear to see if there's any play on the bearing. The bearing doesn't have any play, but the problem is most likely the sensor in this case. But we're gonna remove the sensor so we can look at the tone wheel. If the tone wheel looks good, then we will go ahead and replace the sensor. So now I'm gonna bring you guys up here. So we checked the sensor wiring, so now we can disconnect our wires. So we know that the wiring from the sensor to the ABS control unit is good. So I'm gonna get this out of the way. I can reconnect the sensor on the left side back on. Okay, so this can go back over here. Okay, now I believe our problem is just the sensor. So now I'm gonna bring you to the wheel. We have one more step to do before we fix this vehicle. Now I sprayed a little bit of WD-40 around the sensor. So now I'm gonna remove the sensor. So let's remove the sensor. We're gonna inspect the tone wheel on the bearing. If the tone wheel looks good, we're gonna go ahead and replace the sensor. So I'm gonna undo this little star bolt over here. So here comes the bolt for the sensor. So now we're gonna try to wiggle the sensor out. Let me grab a screwdriver and pry this out. So right there. So here comes the old sensor. Okay, so now we have to check the tone wheel on the bearing. So the way we're gonna check that is we're gonna use this mirror over here. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I can actually see there. It looks like the tone wheel is just fine. I hope you guys can see. Let me move the light. Hopefully you guys can see that. So there is the tone wheel. So just look at the mirror. So I'm gonna spin the wheel. As you can see, the wheel is spinning, and our tone wheel on the bearing is spinning nicely and smoothly. So our tone wheel is good, okay? And the bearing doesn't have any play on it. So the problem is the sensor, okay? So the tone wheel is fine. We are dealing with a defective sensor over here. So I'm gonna remove this sensor, okay? I'm gonna get it removed, and then I'm gonna order the new sensor. Once the new sensor comes in, I'll bring you guys back up so we can install it. And after we install the sensor, we're gonna lower the vehicle and clear the fault codes and test drive it to see if our ABS light will remain off while we're gonna drive the vehicle after installing the new sensor. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get the sensor ordered, and then I'll bring you guys back up. All right, guys, so I received the new sensor from the dealer. Here is the right rear wheel speed sensor for this Dodge Sprinter. So here's the part number. So they just delivered it from the dealer. So here is the new sensor. As you can see, the one on the right has a gray connector. Okay, so now let's take this to the vehicle. So I'm going to remove this old one and I'm going to install the new one. Okay, after I get the new one installed, I'll bring you guys back up so we can verify our repair. Okay, I have installed the new right rear ABS sensor. So here's the sensor. Okay, here's the wiring of it. As you can see, it's nice and shiny. So the wiring of the sensor goes along this park brake cable. And if we come over here, you see that I have reconnected all the electrical connectors of the sensors. Okay, so our new sensor over here looks cleaner than the other ones. Okay, so everything is reinstalled, everything is reconnected. Okay, all the electrical connectors are reconnected. So now I'm gonna lower the vehicle so we can test drive it. So now we're gonna take this van for a test drive. So I'm gonna turn the key on. I'm gonna bring up the scan tool here. So let's go into the ABS control unit. So let's clear this. Let's read the code again. So right there, no codes. That's good. So let's go to data display. We're gonna customize this list. We're just gonna select the wheel speed sensor data pins. So now I'm gonna graph all 4 of them. All right, so I'm gonna start the engine. So right there. So I'm gonna sit the scan tool right here. So now let's drive out of the shop. So we don't have to go far. I can already see a difference on the scan tool data pins. Actually, let me bring up the scan tool here. So right there, as you can see, we have data on all the sensors. Okay, and right now the ABS light went off. I mean, we are low on fuel. We gotta fill this up. But as you can see, the ABS light is no longer remaining on the dash. Okay, so that's good. Now let's drive. I'm gonna show you the scan tool again. So right there, as you can see, pretty much all the graphs are mirroring each other, so that's good. We now have 4 working sensors, so we're good to go. This is fixed, guys. Now let's drive around and drive back to the shop so we can wrap up this video. So we are back at the shop. I'm gonna bring up the scan tool so we can look at the data on the scan tool. So right here, as you can see, now all our wheel speed sensors are working. So this is fixed. The problem was a defective right rear wheel speed sensor. So I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. So as you can see, we now have activity on all the sensors. So that's good. So let's back out of here and read the codes in this ABS module. As you can see, we don't have any trouble codes. So this is fixed, guys. Let's back out of here. Okay, so we are out of the ABS control module. I'm gonna start the engine again. Remember before, the ESP light was on and the ABS light was on as well. Okay, we're gonna have to put fuel in this van, but right there, as you can see, the ABS light went off and the ESP light also went off. Okay, so that's it, guys. This is fixed. The problem was a defective wheel speed sensor. So I'm gonna leave it right over here, guys. I'm gonna turn off the engine. I hope you liked the video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.